Hi folks, we're going to be rewriting equations and rewriting formulas. So what are some formulas that you know? If you think about geometry, are there any formulas that you know from geometry that come to mind right away? Maybe area equals base times height. That might be one formula. Or perimeter equals 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. That might be another formula. Here I have on the next slide, I just have a bunch of different formulas. Some might look familiar to you and some may not. This first one here is distance equals rate times time. Okay, so the distance an object has gone equals the rate at which it's going times the time at which it took to get there. The second one has to do with interest. Interest equals the principal times the rate times the time. That has to do with money. What do you think of when you see number 3? Hopefully Fahrenheit and Celsius, okay, or temperature. Okay, all of the other ones, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, should be familiar formulas from geometry. So the first part of the assignment, you're just going to have equations, okay? So not actual formulas, but just equations where you're going to be solving for one part. Okay, so when we look at number 1, and you're asked to solve for A, it means I have to get rid of that 5 on the right side. Since the right side is A divided by 5, if I multiply both sides of the equation by 5, then can you see that the 5 goes away and I've solved for A? A equals 5 times M. Okay, so that just took me one step. Number 2, if I'm solving that for A, I have to get A by itself, so I have to get rid of the 7. So I'm going to subtract 7. So I would have H minus 7 equals A. 3 and 4 get a little trickier. Okay, I got to isolate that A term in number 3, the B over A, but first I'm going to move the D by subtracting. So think of it just as a number. So what I have is M cubed minus D equals B over A. Okay, can you see like that's similar to number 1? Number 1 I had A over 5, but now I have B over A. Oh goodness, I dropped my pen. B over A in number 3. So in order to get A by itself, well, first thing I'm going to have to do is multiply by A. So I have to multiply this whole left side, let me write it up here, by A. Then I would be left with a B here, right, because that goes away. Let's keep this parenthesis like this. So A is being multiplied by that set of parentheses. So if I divide by the whole thing that's in parentheses, can you see that this would all cross out? And now A is by itself. A equals B over M cubed minus D. Okay, let's look at the fourth one. I'm trying to solve for A. First thing I'm going to do is move this 8. Okay, so it's gone from the left-hand side. I moved it to the right-hand side. Well, now I've got this 1/5 R. Okay, so think of that as its own coefficient. So if I divide by 1/5 R, I'd have to divide this whole thing by 1/5 R. Okay, another way to think about it is taking the G cubed divided by 1/5 R and the 8 divided by 1/5 R. When you divide by a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal. So this 1/5, I can really flip around to the numerator and make it a 5. So 5G cubed over R equals, I'm going to multiply by 5 over 1 here, so that's gone, 40, not equals, I should say plus, 40 over R. Oops. And take a look at the solutions and how they're writing them out in Delta Math, and that will help you to work through the problems. The second part of the assignment is formulas. So rather than just equations with variables in them, they're going to be specific formulas that stand for something. Okay, so I've got a formula here that has to do with force and gravity, and then another formula, the second one, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, is the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, so both formulas. This first one, I'm asked to solve for r. Well, in order to do that, I have to get this r squared out of the denominator. So if I multiply by r squared, can you see if I do that on both sides, it cancels here and here. So then what I have is r squared f sub g equals g m sub 1 m sub 2. And the subscripts just identify the different variables. Now I have to divide by f sub g. I divide this whole thing by f sub g. Okay, I'm kind of running out of room here. But remember, my goal is to get r by itself. Okay, so what I want is r equals something. And what I have is r squared equals. How do you undo a square? Well, I can take the square root. So if I square root this, and then I square root this whole thing, that's going to give me just r by itself. Okay, so r is going to equal the square root of that whole right side. Let's do the next one. Solve for c. I have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, here's an example of another square root situation. I need to undo this square. Over here I have a squared plus b squared. If I square root the c squared, that leaves me with c. So then I have to square root the left-hand side. So what I have is c equals the square root of a squared plus b squared. All right, so look at the solutions in Delta Math to help you through solving, because solving formulas can be very complicated. So you have to write out your work. You're going to have to show steps, or things can get mixed up easily. So go to Delta Math. There's two separate assignments. The first one is rewriting equations. The second one is rewriting formulas. And then here's the puzzle. Keep in touch. Keep in touch, folks. If you have questions, please reach out.